Welcome back to the study room. And so I'm going to give you during finals week what I've learned from the semester. So we're discussing about family relationships and romantic relationships. So to start off with family relationships, obviously going into verbal aggression. So verbal aggression has been found just from how family dynamics are. Usually verbal aggression can come from in families, just from how past generation how they pass on and how they communicate. So like in a family, if they are very just harsh with each other, so as in an example, like my dad's family, so my great grandpa was a prison warden, so he would mainly how he would parental his kids and his family and speak to his kids is how a prison warden would treat his kids in a way. And he would direct all that type of like anger and treatment and humiliation type of punishment and care to his kids. And obviously that got passed down to my grandpa, and that's how he tried to do his parental ways towards my dad and all of his siblings. And obviously with that verbal aggression, it has created a lot of past like traumas in some ways, which in general has a bad outcome in all those things. But in general, to what makes a good relationship in families, it has been shown that through verbal aggression in this article, one second, let me pull it up. This article called Argument and Verbal Aggression in Constructive and Destructive Family and Organizations. And there's this quote that I like, it's called, it says, verbal aggression behavior is more closely associated with destructive disagreements where relationships between participants may not be seen. And I feel like in those type of family dynamics, they are very restricted on seeing who they are. If something is very viewed on how you parental a child in your family or how you were brought up, so you pass it down to your kids, usually not looking more at the individual and who they are, but just in general, that's the ideal way how to parent a kid 101 in a way. So it takes away of how a family could be a good relationship, because it only does is separates between the two individuals, because you don't see the human part of the person, and it just dehumanizes the relationship and even the individual, aka the child. So in general, what makes a good relationship? Basically you can find it through I found in the textbook through the big five in general, to understand what the personality of the person is. So the big five covers a big chunk of traits. So it's like openness, conscious, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So basically knowing like those type of levels an individual has gives a better understanding on who they are as a person. And those five are listed in the textbook. So having a better like concept of knowing who they are as a person, of their personality, can give a better relationship overall and show what the difference is between like the parent and the child, or just in general humanizes like each individual child alone, because in general each child is different in the family. As we can see, like as the oldest, it's usually known as like how you mentioned of Mindy being very on it, and in general she's very due diligent on her tasks. And then when you come to a younger child, it's more free-spirited on how they look upon life, because just the difference of how they're raised and how they act in their order, and that's just how it happens. And understanding a personality in a family relationship gives a better understanding on who they are as a person and makes it more humanly better. And in another article I have found, which is called What Do We Access When We Access the Big Five Traits? This research has looked more deeper into all the traits in the big five, and just in general in a study, just to give a better overall like perspective in all of it. And I feel like in general a lot of people, like for myself, are very extroverted, so understanding like on who they are as a person and their extrovertedness gives a better idea, and that kind of connects to like conscientiousness. So basically like it was right here, it says consistent with conscious includes being governed by conscious. So I feel like in general, it's a very voluntary type of task that you have to do to put forth in your relationships. So having a very conscious thought process on how you go into a relationship, because obviously in general, to make a relationship better in family, it is a decision you have to choose daily, no matter what. So if you have a bad trauma family and how they do their cycling of treating each other, obviously it's your choice on how you want to move forward. If you don't want to, you're choosing to move forward. And to make that a better understanding for the big five and applying that into life and what makes a better understanding of a relationship and being conscious of knowing who the person is, that's a voluntary thought process on how you're going to be moving forward in life. So for family, in order to make it to be a good relationship, it is a choice on a daily, or even just a minute by minute type of thing. Because I'll say in a family dynamic, it's always moving fast, as we watched in the Boy movie. I don't remember the name, but basically it shows that life will always change, but the family dynamic, as in mom, son, and daughter, and possibly father, obviously not in that movie, really, shows that in that dynamic that they will always have each other no matter what, and they always look out for each other. But the thing is, it's a choice what you do to make your dynamic be easier, because a sister could have been nicer to her mom without giving a lot of attitude. That's a conscious choice that she gives to give off more of a toxic type of family dynamic, or just a verbal aggression type of way, that how she comes off. But in general, to make a family dynamic more easy to maneuver through life and with as a family, it has to be with a conscious choice. And that's all it has to be, no matter what. And so moving into a romantic relationship, family can have an effect with romantic relationships as well, because it can be passed on how you see between your mother and father love each other, or even how your father loves their daughter, because obviously a daughter will view that into her husband, or even as a mother's love to her son. Those can have some relations and some similarities that can go into a romantic relationship, but a romantic relationship has its own version of a relationship, because obviously family and romantic are not the same. If it was, we would see families basically be marrying each other more often. That's common in that type of society, but it's not. So in a romantic relationship, I'm going to go off of verbal aggression again, but it's verbal aggression in a romantic relationship dynamic. So in my last paper, I went into about verbal aggression can go into deeper, as in potential verbal and physical abuse. Because verbal aggression can be like just mean words, or it can escalate into more, which can be more into a toxic relationship. But what makes a good relationship for romantically? Well, it has been shown through verbal aggression in romantic relationships. When it's reported, stress levels are higher, and however individuals vary in their coping tends to report similar levels of verbal aggression. And this is found in the article Stress, Anger, and Verbal Aggression in Maintained Relationships Moderately Affects Individual Dynamic Coping. So with that quote that I've read, it is known that it has a big effect overall, because usually it's from miscommunications over stress levels. In general, in a romantic relationship, when you are in a marriage, it gets stressful. There's finances, and when you are like having kids, you're dealing with kids' finances, and then it's just stuff breaks down. Literally, like what you mentioned about like literally what's been happening on your bills, basically from the fridge, the van, the plumbing, from the toy being in the toilet, and everything. Like those can create low stress levels, and that's when verbal aggression can be shown even more. And in a romantic relationship, it is obviously not the best to have a lot of that aggression, because obviously it hurts one another and it lashes out towards one another. And in order to like move forward and have a better understanding to make it healthy in a verbal aggression, or to reduce the amount of verbal aggression, in the little chart I found in our forgiveness PowerPoint that you have. It's literally the self-report forgiveness strategies in romantic relationship and outcomes in one of your lectures. And basically for forgiveness seeking strategies, it's ways, or forgiveness granting strategies, to kind of just move forward in a relationship that has a lot of verbal abuse, or that can lead into physical abuse as well. So like obviously when you're doing a forgiveness seeking strategy, like you just want some positive outcomes no matter what. Obviously you don't want negative or no outcomes, because in general that does not make the relationship further. It just keeps it on the back burner or makes the relationship diminish slowly over time. So in general, having explicit acknowledgement of like apology or remorse is very key to have in anything, is to be able to talk it out. So that means that could be like used as the communistar. So obviously in the communistar, it is more as in you're listening to the person on what they said, and obviously you are going to reiterate what they said, and that means that's a big listening task to use in order to understand what they're trying to come across and understand what they're truly trying to say to you, and not tune out what they're saying just to give off what your dialogue or what your monologue you only want to say and to just listen to. Because obviously a relationship is a two-way street, so you have to understand where the other person's coming from. So having explicit acknowledgement in general when you're hearing the other person in the communistar is very key to have, and also in general to show that you have remorse at the end of the day. And then when you're looking at someone in that like communistar, obviously you don't want to look angry or mad or something like that, or just like in my mind like a bitchy look, because that means it's a nonverbal assurance you're showing. Like it's not really assurance if you're giving a mean look off to someone, because if you're for nonverbal communications to someone, if you're listening to someone like show their feelings and how they feel in this moment of this argument, and you're showing no remorse, then obviously that's not going to be a good outcome at the end of the day in a relationship. And to make it good has to be through nonverbal assurance as well. And obviously depending of the two individuals in a romantic, obviously for me it would be humor as well in that type of way for forgiveness seeking, because humor can lighten up the mood when you're having a tough conversation. Because at the end of the day, sometimes conversations are very hard, they're awkward and weird to be in a situation just to listen to. So it's easier to have something to lighten up the mood, to make it fun, joking, and also just reassures the relationship as well between the two individuals. Try to make it normal again, to normalize that you're moving forward as in a way, not normalizing to make everything okay, as if you had a bad argument or it's a bad moment as a couple, but just to move forward with it and not hold back. And for like forgiveness granting strategies, it's like verbally saying out loud, I forgive you and everything, or even just in general like that. It helps that saying that will have a positive, or even just nonverbal display, like I hug, like, I forgive you, like, and then you hug them, like, because you're showing that I do accept your apology, or in general, or saying I'm sorry, because you're showing it to someone, and doing a hug afterwards. So something that has double reassurance of verbal and nonverbal cues to help like have a better outcome as a relationship. And then finally, like in a good relationship as well, this article, Just Relationships, a Third Way Communication Ethic, when we discussed that on Tuesday in class, it was very smart to look into more in that article, because it showed what makes a good relationship romantically very clear in my eyes, just because in general that it really showed that what is said in the article, that between like the perceptual justice and the where is it? Hold on a second. Sorry, Professor Danaher. I had it. Perceptual and I believe it's distributive justice. Between the two, they're both good to have. So distributive means like just to be like picking and choosing when you do something for like a verbally cued justice, but in like for like the cookie. Like you can't have a cookie now because it's before dinner, and so that's not fair if you can have a cookie throughout the day. Like that's distributed justice. For perceptual justice, it's basically between the two. Like they just have those little difference, and it's kind of like how do you make them both combine together in a relationship, and it's like the moral ground of it all. So like recognizing the difference of change in a relationship, because obviously you can't just see something very like black and white in a relationship. It can't be, oh, you said that I can't do this, but like there's some reasons and context behind things that happen. And to make a good relationship move forward in that, it is from understanding like where the person's at and understanding about the idea of change. So like our conversation in a romantic relationship, how can you move forward in a romantic relationship if someone truly hurt you that bad, or like your partner truly hurt you that bad, if they put you in that awful state, how can you move forward with that? But it's also like the idea of forgiveness and knowing that and having that conversation. Or obviously there's sometimes like it takes time for forgiveness in like those things like rape or anything, like mainly rape and just in general physical violence in a relationship. Like obviously it takes time for someone to forgive. And for myself, like I understand that it takes a lot of like understanding on a person who they are as a person, because at the end of the day people are evolving and understanding more about themselves. Because at the end of the day I can't say it for myself that I know my self-concept 100% thoroughly at the end of the day, because I'm still learning about myself and I'm still learning parts to accept myself. Obviously some people might have their full versions that they accept themselves today, but I can say for myself I'm still learning my own self-concept. So at the end of the day, like I have to give that same reassurance and understanding back to another person, or like my romantic partner, because we might have our moments that we're stressed out and we're gonna take it out on each other and probably be very verbally abusive accidentally, like being aggressive and showing that to each other. Like I might snap out at someone or at my romantic partner, but then they have to understand like there's some change that can be on, like understanding forgiveness, but two, also understanding that like the person can change too. So like if my partner came after me, I have to understand they can change and be forgiving and try to move forward and try to be more restrictive. Because I know for myself with my boyfriend, like I can sometimes say some very snarky comments or very straight, blunt words that might sound very hurtful to him, to his eyes, because it might not be, I'm used to saying that in a setting that does not seem verbally abusive or very verbally aggressive. So understanding and changing my words up and being thoughtful in that change as an individual, I can change that like that. And that can be the same way towards him as well. He can restrict his certain words because he might know some words that might possibly hurt me as a person, or how he communicates to me, that he's gonna make it more in a thoughtful way to make sure that he's not gonna be hurting me as a person. But also at the same time, if I do hurt the person's feelings, obviously there's a forgiveness level where we're gonna show it and talk about it and use those cues from the lecture PowerPoint that shows like the forgiveness seeking strategies and the forgiveness granting strategies as well, because those are cues to make sure that you're moving forward, you're talking about that problem or that conflict or something that's just not right, and you know that. Just being honest and being vulnerable in that to move forward and make the relationship better. And at the end of the day, it's always focusing on that change, like in that last article I just mentioned, to move forward in life and try to like not go back to that much, but try to do better. So it means being less verbally aggressive. You're making progress, because at the end of the day, we're not perfect, we're all human, because literally we're literally created as man and woman, and we do not know at all what's going on, because we were all created by sin at this point, because Adam and Eve sinned. So no matter what, in all of our relationships, it's going to be very hard to make it ideally perfect, but it's a day-to-day basis that we do as Christians as we walk through life to try to make it be better and be a better change. So that means if it's a tiny step into the right direction, it'll make a big impact overall. And I feel like that's the same way towards family relationships as well. For family, it is the same way with verbal aggression. It might be a different aspect on how avenues you try to pursue it, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it is a way to move forward, and it's a tiny step you have to take as a choice. They're both voluntary choices, but obviously different versions in a relationship, how you pursue it to make a relationship better in that way. Obviously, verbal aggression is the same exact term, same concept, but it can be applied into two different relationships that that are similar, but also different, to have their own explicit details on what is that relationship. So overall, what makes a good romantic relationship is just the idea of very understanding of the person and who they are, as in change. So as in for verbal aggression, like moving forward with that, it's understanding who they are. So be forgiving if that shows those cues in order to be raw and vulnerable with who you are, but understanding as well on the vice versa, like they can change and also you can change, because you also want that same response. They can understand you can improve your behavior as well as a person. And then in a family relationship is understanding who that person is individually, because at the end of the day, you might be blood, but blood is somehow different because everyone has their own different DNAs. So that means that person is different. So understanding who they are in the big five, their big personalities, and knowing all their little characteristics on who they are in those 5 big categories will define and understand them better and reduce more family conflict, as in verbal aggression, and not dehumanizing anyone in a family, as in a parent to a child, or a child to a parent, or a child to child, basically. But yeah. Thank you so much, and this is what I learned. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you again, Mr. Danifer.